I know the innermost fears of many of my peers, and all because I have them too, and they are the same as everyone else. Many people will be surprised, but I have heard from my friends who conduct psychological research that, in fact, a lot of people, including adults, imagine their funeral. The reasons are all different, but the common one is curiosity. As a teenager, I often wanted to take my own life. This is a period when everything falls out of hand, a black streak of failure appears in life, and there is no one to speak out because it's shameful, scary, and why? And then I imagined that I was dead. And here is my funeral, the tears of my loved ones. My mother would have cried the most. My classmates would have come to me with their parents and remember who was friends with me, sadly. It was both interesting and scary. With this fear, I grew up and entered adulthood. Gradually, it became such an obsession. I wanted to experience what it was like to be buried alive. How does it feel to be buried? They can't tell because they're dead, right? So I decided to get some answers. I will tell you everything in order, and you will subscribe to this channel. There are still a lot of cool, unusual stories. My name is Sophia, or just Sophie. My parents and I moved to a new city because of my father's work, and it's been a few years since we put roots down here. A new place meant a new life. This is a good attempt to try something unknown for yourself. We began to live, gradually making new friends, getting to know our neighbors, and so on. So I went to a new school and found a friend. Her name is Sally. We became very good friends with her. We sat together in classes, often went to each other's homes, spent holidays, kept secrets, cried, and laughed. Everything is like everyone else. Once we decided to have a pajama party at her house. We stocked up on cookies and ice cream and told each other stories from deep childhood, family problems, and shared our innermost fears as we sat in the room. This was my favorite moment, heart-to-heart conversations. I told her about my fear of death and funerals in my honor, about my fear of coffins and things like that. I'm especially afraid of this after the death of my grandmother. When I saw and took part in the funeral, I felt uneasy. The immobilized body lies in a wooden coffin, and everybody looks at it, crying, and then they send it deep into the ground, from where it will never get out. I found out that Sal has a fear of being alone in the bathroom. Yes, that's why her mother is sitting next to her and waiting for her daughter to bathe. But the biggest test of her nerves is not getting married. Her mother believes that only losers are left in a divorce. For this reason, Sally clings to her boyfriend so much that she sometimes suffocates him with her love. Although they have only been dating for a couple of months, Sal has already built their marriage in her head. This scared Frank. At the end of the conversation, we concluded that we need to face our fears, face to face. This is the only way we can get rid of them once and for all. Sally's problem was easier to solve. She just had to talk to her mother about what if she gets divorced or doesn't get married at all? Yes, they had a long conversation, but they found a compromise. But what should I do? Where can I get a coffin and bury myself? I wanted everything to look as realistic as possible. Then Sophie read on the internet that the funeral of a boy was to be held the next day. He is our age, was a star of the city, very actively participated in life of the city, sang and danced beautifully. He was the son of the mayor and tragically died, drowned in the river. His body has not been found for a week, so it was decided to hold a funeral with an empty coffin. I know it was pretty cynical, but I had to overcome that fear or I would suffer like this for the rest of my life. Decided. Sophie and I naturally didn't talk about anything to anyone. I had to sneak into the coffin while he was in the house. We were supposed to introduce ourselves as acquaintances of the deceased. I would have been buried, and then Sophie and the guy would have me dug up when everyone left. Just the earth would still be loose. Everything went according to plan. We managed to go into the house, express our condolences to his parents. Then, while no one was in the room, I climbed into the closed coffin and hid there. I felt like I was being carried out of the room. I heard everyone crying and screaming. I imagined it was crying for me. Then we went to the cemetery. where the priest read a long prayer, the relatives said goodbye, and finally the coffin was lowered into the hole and began to fill up with earth. Every clatter of a handful of earth on the wooden lid reminded me of my grandmother's funeral. I wonder what these people are thinking about now. What was that boy Tom like? I heard a woman scream. It was the loudest, probably his mother. I was completely buried. After about 20 minutes, I felt cold. I could smell the damp earth. The tree quickly cooled down. I already felt uneasy. I didn't lose my composure for the first hour, despite the fact that it was dark, cramped, and almost impossible to breathe. But when I started to freeze, I really got scared. I felt like a living corpse, and I wasn't going to die yet. I somehow dialed Sophie's phone, and she picked up the phone and said that not everyone had left the cemetery yet. My parents are still there. Another couple of hours passed, and my limbs were already numb from the cold and from not being able to move. I started panting and panicking. I felt like I'd been lying there too long. I called Sophie again, and she said her boyfriend was on his way. After an eternity, I was really panicking. As if to spite me, my nose itched terribly because of the dust around, and I could not scratch it. It became another torture. I kept calling and calling my friend, and when my phone ran out of battery, it was the last straw, and I started screaming. I yelled as loud as I could. I didn't even hear them dig me up. An eternity later, I heard a thud. It was a shovel. Finally, they dug me out. It was already night. I flew out of this coffin and started screaming that I really almost died in there, why they took so long to dig me out. Then I stopped for a minute and saw two tired friends in front of me. They were covered in mud, with terrible shortness of breath, with shovels in their hands. They were sweating, and they were angry. What? If it wasn't for your fucking idea to go into the fucking coffin, nothing would have happened. Do you realize the risk we ran digging up the mayor's son coffin? What would happen if we were spotted? Do you think we should have dug you up in daylight? My evil friends screamed. It was only then that I realized how crazy the idea had almost caused us a lot of problems. In general, the three of us buried an empty coffin. We managed it by morning. Well, my smart friend told my folks that I was going to stay with her, and her folks that she was staying with me. We bought time. By morning, I was as dirty as they were. Sophie's boyfriend was in shock after that for another month. He was afraid to communicate with me. No wonder. But honestly, I didn't overcome my fear. On the contrary, now that I know exactly what it's like to lie in a tight, damp place, I don't want to die anymore. I decided to appreciate and love my life as it is, because it's so much better than what I went through. Believe me.
Guys, hello. My name is Kristen. I would like to tell you an incredible story about my boyfriend, or rather about what I went through with him and because of him. Honestly, you definitely haven't met anyone like this, and if you have, be sure to write about it in the comments so that I know. While I start the story, don't forget to put likes, share my story, and also be sure to subscribe to the channel. So, 2 years ago, I met this wonderful guy. He was incredible, so kind, beautiful, sensitive, and very charming. You know, it was love at first sight, and I was sure that we would be together. Yeah, I may have lost my self-esteem, but the result was exactly what I wanted. In short, Philip worked as a salesman at the sporting goods store where we first met. I noticed him and just came over to ask the price of a bike. Man, I didn't even know how to ride a sports bike. I only had to go there at all to ask about my brother's boxing gloves. Phil politely and in great detail began to talk about the bikes. He showed me the advantages of models, and I just followed him around the store and looked him in the face. Eventually, when the product was finished, I asked Phil for his phone number. He laughed for a long time and then asked me why I didn't ask him before he started talking. It was nice to hear your voice, I said. We exchanged numbers, began to write off, call each other, and gradually began to meet. My relationship with Phil was exemplary. Everything was fine. We understood each other perfectly. We loved to eat, drink, watch our favorite TV shows together, and we didn't forget about work and recreation. Phil just loved riding those sports bikes. He always wanted to take part in a cycling competition one day, and I completely believed in him. Then last year, Phil suggested that I go with him to another city, just for such competitions. Of course, I agreed. We packed up, saved up some money, and went on an adventure. When we arrived at the venue, we were in a great mood. We dreamed that if Phil wins the competition, we will definitely take a vacation for a couple of weeks. We will celebrate this event together in a different, more suitable place for a vacation. I wanted to go to Vegas just to live the nightlife and soak up the energy, and Phil was totally supportive. The day of the competition came literally the next morning. We had a good workout, a bite to eat, and set off. Oh yes, I forgot to say that it was not just a type of bike race. You had to ride bikes on high mountains, on bumps, sometimes dangerous. Yes, this is a serious level, but Phil had been preparing for this event for many years, so I couldn't stop him. Finally, I kissed the guy for good luck, and they took off. I was supposed to be waiting for him at the finish line 3 hours later, in a completely different place. I went there with the rest of the support group. I was visibly nervous, thought that this could happen, did not betray the value, and waited further. After 3 hours, the first winners gradually began to appear. We greeted them with applause. The first, second, and third came, and I started to worry. Then the other participants arrived, and my boyfriend was still missing. Then there was some commotion. The organizers took me aside and told me that he fell off the hill and fell with a bike down next to the river. I lost consciousness and only came to myself after a while. Yes, as you can tell, Phil's body was found in the water when he wasn't breathing. I wanted to die with him. I couldn't believe this had happened. When the doctor said he was dead, I thought for a long time that they were joking. And then the running started. I had to collect all the documents, our things, and go home with him. Cargo 200 was delivered the next day. I didn't sleep that day at all, because I couldn't believe it. Upon arrival, all his relatives and family were already informed, and we started preparing for the funeral. I asked him to say goodbye to me at home, in the apartment we shared, because that's where our memories lived. I looked at Phil and realized that he was the same as a couple of days ago. He looked like he was sleeping. My friends and I ordered everything we needed from the funeral agency, and people started coming to us. I couldn't believe this was happening. We gave a farewell speech. I was the last. As soon as I finished reading, I picked up the rose and walked over to Phil, tears welling up in my eyes. I started crying so hard that I felt sick. And then something touched my face when I opened my eyes, and I saw Phil lying there looking at me, with his eyes open and trying to wipe away my tears. At that moment, I screamed so loud that the windows in the house almost burst. Everyone present was in shock, and several people lost consciousness. Phil got up from the coffin. He looked at us all for a long time, then at himself, at his coffin, and was like, "What the fuck is going on here?" Then I yelled his name and ran to him, and someone called an ambulance, and there was silence in the air. I didn't know what to do, and then I said that he was dead and his funeral was going on. No, I wasn't going to die. I still want to live, he said, staggering slightly. The guests began to film everything on camera. Then an ambulance arrived and took us away. At the hospital, it turned out that he had survived a clinical death. It was such a rare occasion, and you can think of Phil as special. I couldn't believe this was happening, and Phil didn't feel like it either. We were in the hospital for a while, and he got tested, and then he wanted to eat. I fed him, then called the guests and asked them to leave. I canceled all services and went to the house to clean everything. Phil was released from the hospital a week later. He seemed to be doing well, and we went home. Phil said he'd stop using bikes for a while, which I was glad of. We both took another vacation and decided to just relax at home and not go anywhere. My boyfriend spent several days asking about what happened while he was away, and at the end said that the coffin was not the color he liked, which is probably why he was outraged and decided to live a little longer. Hi, my name is Chloe. My story is not for the faint of heart. I'll tell you right away. The thing is, I woke up in a cemetery and it was really creepy. If you've never woken up like that, you're luckier than me. I'm not going to drag this out too long, but I'm going to start the story with the best part. When I opened my eyes, I noticed that it felt like nighttime outside. My body was terribly achy with fatigue. It felt like I had been beaten with sticks. I struggled to turn my neck, and then I yawned and wanted to stretch out my legs and arms, but immediately my limbs rested against something hard. What is that? Why is it so cramped in here? I thought. I wanted to get up, but I immediately hit my head on something hard. I felt something on top of me with my hand, as if the ceiling were hanging very low. Then I realized that it was the same on the sides as it was under my feet. Am I in a box? I asked myself out loud, then tapped all the obstacles. And then goosebumps ran down my skin. Am I in a coffin? I yelled, panicked. I began frantically kicking my arms and legs, but I could not move the lid in any way. I already realized that I was short of breath and scary thoughts visited my head. What if I die like this? What if I suffocate? How did I get here in the first place? I decided to calm down a little and try to remember the last thing that happened. Moments, as if in flashes, my brain gave out pictures of me walking somewhere. Oh, right. It was a hike in the mountains. I remember walking ahead of the group, singing a song to myself, and then suddenly the water was cold. Maybe I fell downhill. What happened next? Then I remember a bright light. Maybe it was a hospital. My breathing quickened. Am I dead? I started pinching my face and hands and realized that no, I was still alive since I could feel it. After gathering my thoughts, I began to beat out the lid of the coffin. I kicked as hard as I could, scared, tired, hungry, and thirsty. I tried not to waste my energy screaming, so I concentrated entirely on freeing myself. By some miracle, I had a file under my ass. What is that doing here? I asked myself, but I was glad, and I used it. The earth sprinkled in my face after I unscrewed the plank, then the lid. I began to gasp, but I got free and wormed my way through the earth like a worm. My hand felt for air, and hooray! A breath of air! The earth was in my nose and ears and mouth, but I was breathing. I broke free! I was alive! After a couple of minutes of catching my breath, I saw that it was deep night outside. I stood up and tried to get my bearings. I stood and looked at the moon. Then I took one last deep breath and pulled myself up, shook myself off, and turned around and saw a man in front of me. He stood motionless with his eyes goggling at me. I hesitantly waved at him, and he was like, don't eat me, and ran off. When I looked around, I realized that I was standing in a cemetery with my grandfather's grave next to me. But by that point, nothing surprised me anymore. All I did next was to look for a way out. After an hour or so, it was already light out. I went to the road and caught a ride. A truck driver stopped, picked me up, and probably regretted that he had decided to give me a lift. "Where are you from?" "From the cemetery." "Yeah, we all go there sometimes. Who did you bury?" "I didn't bury anyone. I came out of there." That's a funny joke, but I'm serious." "I am too." He stopped breathing. He slowly turned to me and asked, "What do you mean?" "I dug myself out of a grave. How else can I explain it?" "Oh, God." He crossed himself, began to pray, and I said calmly, "Don't worry, I won't eat you. Just take me to the right place." He was quiet the whole way, even turned off the music. I could hear his frantic heartbeat. When we got there, I thanked him and got out of the car, and he started to drive away. He'd probably never take on another hitchhiker again. The sun was already up, and I walked up to my house and grabbed the key, as I always did, under my mother's flower pot. Then I freely opened the door and entered the house. From the kitchen came the smell of my mother's pancakes. It must have been Saturday because that was the only day my mother made pancakes. And then my stomach growled. I realized that I could have eaten an entire elephant. As if nothing had happened, I walked into the living room, took off my shoes, and went straight into the kitchen. Mom was standing at the stove. I walked up stealthily, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, how's it going?" Then I went to the sink to wash my hands. Mom turned around and her face went pale. She was standing there with a spoon in her hands, looking at me in a daze. Her pancakes were already burning. "Mom, you're burning there." "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh no, is that you?" "Yeah, I'm starving." "I'm sorry, Mom. There must have been some mistake." "Don't worry, I'm not offended. It was just uncomfortable coming out of the coffin, but I managed. Somebody left a file behind, as if they knew, or maybe it was just a joke. Who made that up? Probably Josie. My sister was always a prankster. How long was I gone? A day, 2 days? A couple of hours? Pancakes are awesome. I'm so hungry. I was chatting, and my mom slapped and fainted. Her pancakes started to stink, so I put the pan away, and then I heard Josie's voice. "Mom, you're burning something. Is it the pancakes?" She ran into the kitchen and saw me. Josie looked different. She had breasts, hair. She'd somehow matured noticeably. She saw me, and she had the same look on her face as my mother had. She fell to the floor too, and I just sat there eating the pancakes. Then I brought both of them to their senses. Mom and my sister hugged and cried and couldn't figure out what was going on. I sat down on the floor with them and asked who pranked me like that. "You don't remember anything?" "I remember I was camping. Then it was like I went swimming and that was it." "God, we buried you a year ago. You died camping in the mountains. We were told you drowned, fell off a cliff in an unfortunate accident. They tried to save you, but it was too late." "So you buried me? I don't understand. Was that a prank?" "No, you had a funeral, Chloe. I buried you." Mom got hysterical. My sister calmed her down, and now I was kind of freaking out. I told them what had happened, and we sat on the kitchen floor for a long time. After a couple of hours, I finally showered, then came out of the bathroom and asked who put the file in the coffin. "Me." "So you knew I was alive?" "We had a thing about that file. You used it to slash the tires on my ex-boyfriend's car one time. And then we used the same file to open up all the stashes in Mom's closet to steal money." "So that was you?" "I'm sorry, Mom. It was a long time ago." How? I told my mom in detail what happened and how it happened. We talked about the situation for a few more days. Honestly, neither of us understood whether we should be happy or what to do about it at all. And then Josie suggested my mom show me to the hospital. To do this, we had to go to another city where no one knew me and have me examined. We didn't reveal the details. My doctor said everything was fine, that I just needed some vitamins and to get my hemoglobin up. That's all. While I was hiding at home, no one knew about me coming back to life. All in all, I went back to my old life. It seemed to me that I was just given another chance to live. Maybe I had some unfinished things to do. However, after 2 weeks, I began to notice that I was sleeping worse at night and that I could not satisfy my hunger. I wanted meat. I ate the steaks that my mother cooked, but I could not satisfy my hunger. My appetite became more and more frantic. And then one day, Josie came into the room. She was looking for a Band-Aid. "What happened?" "I was cutting lettuce and I cut my finger. It's bleeding. I need a Band-Aid." I volunteered to help, but as soon as I got close to her wound, the smell of blood was like I was hypnotized. I was so wildly tempted to lick her hand, so I did. "Ew, what are you doing?" my sister asked, and I realized that this was what I had been missing. I sucked on her hand. I wanted to drink blood. I was losing control. "Stupid! You're hurting me! Back off!" Bam! I got hit on the head, and it was like I woke up. As I looked around, I realized I was in the living room, the TV was blaring, there was a zombie movie on, and I was lying on the couch and squeezing Josie's hand. Her hair wasn't long anymore, and the ambiance of the house was different. "What happened?" "Are you stupid? Have you been watching your zombie movies again? I was about to take the remote control and you pinched me." "Where's the blood?" "What blood, you idiot? Let's go to bed. We have school tomorrow. Mom will kill us if we oversleep." "Wait, didn't I die?" "If you did, I wouldn't be upset, honestly." Wow. It turned out that I watched too many movies and fell asleep, and everything I saw was just a dream. One thing that confuses me, though, was that my file, which I always kept in my desk drawer, ended up in the ground. Tell me, guys, did you like my story? Write your opinion about it in the comments below the video. Do not forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel.